I thought the baby shower was just a sweet celebration until my husband leaned in, whispered we need to leave, and revealed something that shattered everything I thought I knew about my best friend. And about my marriage. Asterisk, asterisk, there are days in life that are meant to radiate joy. Days wrapped in soft colors, filled with laughter, surrounded by the illusion of closeness. Baby showers fall into that category. They're supposed to celebrate life, nurture hope, and highlight the bonds between women who cheer each other on. A room full of pastel decorations, ribbon-wrapped gifts, sparkling fruit punch, and curated playlists designed to make everything feel tender and whole. On the surface, it was exactly that. But not everything that glows is golden, and not every smile is sincere. When people gather for joy, they often bring their secrets with them. They dress them up in compliments and hide them under layers of polite conversation. Sometimes, the most painful truths don't stand out, they blend in, camouflaged by forced laughter and clinking glasses. That's what made the baby shower feel strange. It wasn't one clear sign. It was the subtle tension lingering like static in the air. Invisible but impossible to ignore once felt. The decorations were perfect, almost too perfect. The room looked like it had been lifted from a lifestyle magazine. Everything matched, the centerpieces were uniform, the dessert table was a work of edible art, and the cake looked too beautiful to cut. But underneath the flawless aesthetic, something didn't sit right. It was in the way certain people exchanged glances too quickly, the way conversations paused when specific names were mentioned, the way some guests kept checking their phones not out of boredom, but out of anxiety. Energy doesn't lie. Even when everyone is dressed up and smiling, energy tells the truth, and on that day, it was restless, not loud, not obvious, but tense in a way that made silence feel heavier than it should have. People were talking, but listening harder, laughing, but watching more closely. There was joy, yes, but it was cautious, guarded, layered with undertones. That didn't quite match the celebration. There were tiny fractures in the room's harmony, conversations that felt rehearsed, compliments that didn't land naturally, group photos that required too many retakes not because of lighting, but because of the invisible discomfort standing between people. Certain guests stood closer to the edges, some seemed overdressed, others too quiet, and a few looked like they were trying too hard to appear comfortable. It was all very curated but also slightly cracked, like a porcelain plate with a hairline fracture. Beautiful, but fragile and maybe already broken. Among the guests, there was a sense of watching and being watched, a sense that something had either happened or was about to. Even the hostess, glowing and grateful, carried an edge to her smile. The way she glanced at certain people but never approached them directly. The way her laughter spiked slightly too loud, as if drowning something out. She was adored, of course complimented endlessly. But the compliments didn't all come from love. Some were sharp, meant to look supportive but land like judgment, and she knew it. Everyone did, to some extent, but no one acknowledged it aloud. It's often said that women can read rooms in ways that others can't. That we pick up on unsaid things. That we understand tension even when it's unspoken. That day was a testament to that ability. Every woman in that room seemed to be balancing something on her tongue, something withheld, something noticed, something remembered, and yet, the charade went on. Because that's what is done at gatherings like these. The performance of perfection is part of the tradition. Then there was the husband. His presence didn't draw attention, but his demeanor did. Quiet, controlled, not entirely engaged. Not cold, but distant, like someone waiting for a signal only he could see. He wasn't rude, but he wasn't comfortable either. His stillness wasn't calm, it was alert. He didn't hover or interrupt. He watched. He observed, and in a room full of celebratory chaos, his stillness created contrast, a kind of emotional anchor that felt strangely out of place in the occasion's softness. Some guests noticed. They glanced at him the way people glance at a fire alarm, just in case. Some even asked if he was okay, and he responded with a polite smile. But the smile never reached his eyes. He didn't scan the room the way others did. He looked with purpose, not curiosity. He wasn't looking for someone. He was confirming something, and although his face gave nothing away, his body language betrayed a kind of tension not rooted in awkwardness, but in waiting. There's a kind of silence that comes not from lack of words, but from a storm held back. That's the silence he carried. That's the weight that entered the room with him and made it just slightly harder to breathe. No one else seemed to know what it meant, but it was there. strong enough to make even the most oblivious guest pause. The way he stood, the way he leaned in to whisper now and then, the way he gripped his cup with unnecessary force, it all painted the outline of something that hadn't been spoken yet, something that didn't belong in a baby shower, but had found its way in anyway. Sometimes, the most telling signs are the ones no one talks about. The woman who avoids eye contact. The man who keeps checking the door. The laugh that feels slightly off. The hug that ends too quickly. The compliment that feels too practiced. The tension that builds in the spaces between conversations. All of it adds up not into a conclusion, but into a question. What aren't we saying? The day continued with games and gifts and gratitude, but beneath the surface, the air thickened. The smiles became tighter. The joy lessened by degrees. The center of celebration remained bright, but the edges of the event darkened. And through it all, one truth became clearer. There was something in that room that didn't belong to joy. Something waiting to be revealed. Something that made people glance over their shoulders even while pretending not to notice. It was the kind of day that made you question what you missed. What you didn't notice until too late. What was said between words. What lingered in the pauses. What secrets might be floating just beneath the laughter? What truths were sitting silently at the table, waiting for the moment they couldn't be ignored? And sometimes, all it takes is one sentence to pull the thread that unravels everything. Asterisk, asterisk, there are moments in life that do not scream when they arrive. They do not demand attention. They do not come with drama, chaos, or noise. Instead, they slip in silently, small enough to miss, quiet enough to be ignored, but powerful enough to divide your life into before and after. It's not always a confrontation that reshapes everything. Sometimes, it's a whisper, a few words, barely spoken, that land like an earthquake beneath the surface of everything you thought you knew. Whispers have power because they bypass the noise. They slip through the cracks of the performance everyone else is participating in. They don't follow the script. They don't respect the moment. They don't care if it's someone's celebration or someone's stage. They arrive when they must, regardless of timing, place, or impact. They speak a truth that can no longer be buried. A truth that has waited long enough. There is something unsettling about being told you need to leave a place that's supposed to be safe. The unease doesn't come from the words themselves, it comes from what's left unsaid, from the urgency behind them, from the weight they carry. A simple sentence, delivered at the right moment, can collapse the entire structure of comfort that was never truly stable to begin with. When someone you trust says, "We need to go," and their voice carries a tension you've never heard before, the world stops. Everything around you continues, conversations, music, laughter, but your internal world freezes. Not because of fear, but because of instinct. Because some part of you knows what's coming next is not ordinary, it will not be forgotten, it will not be reversible, and it will change how you look at everything and everyone in that room. Whispers carry truth in raw form. Truth stripped of decoration, timing, or diplomacy. They arrive urgent, abrupt, unedited. They come not to wound, but to warn. And sometimes, the whisper is not just about information, it's about protection, about knowing something you don't, about shielding you from a reality you didn't realize was lurking just behind the curated smiles. What is said after the whisper is what lingers. It may be a confession, a discovery, a name, a detail, a connection that no one else has acknowledged. It might be something that was hidden in plain sight, a truth buried beneath years of trust, a secret that finally found a crack in the wall wide enough to escape through. And when it comes, it is rarely gentle. It does not arrive with comfort. It arrives with clarity, and clarity, while sacred, is not soft. Clarity burns away illusion. It strips sentiment from facts. It replaces assumption with sharp edges. It forces you to revisit every memory with new eyes. It does not ask if you're ready. It does not care if you want peace. It gives you truth in its rawest, most unforgiving form. And in that moment, peace is no longer possible, only awakening. A single truth, spoken at the wrong moment, can expose not just one lie, but a web of them. It can pull back the veil on a narrative you've been living for years. It can show you who was never honest, who was pretending, who was covering for someone else, who smiled while hiding things that would have broken you sooner if you'd known. But what's most disorienting is not just the truth itself, it's the way it recasts everything around you. Suddenly, the party feels different. The people feel different. The warmth begins to feel artificial. The closeness feels strategic. The laughter sounds rehearsed. You start to wonder what else is being hidden. What else has been twisted? What conversations happened without your knowledge? What parts of your life were built on false ground? And the one who delivers the truth becomes both your anchor and your mirror. Their voice holds the storm and the shelter. They may not want to be the one to say it, but they know they have to. Because holding it in would be a betrayal greater than silence. Because love sometimes looks like disruption. Because choosing your peace may require destroying your illusion. The words themselves may be simple, but their impact is profound. They carry the weight of discovery, the burden of knowing, the responsibility of truth. They are not accusations. They are revelations, and they are irreversible. Once spoken, they cannot be unheard. Once heard, they cannot be forgotten. They change the atmosphere inside you, even if no one else notices the shift. You try to hold on to the room, to the celebration, to the image of the people around you, but something inside has cracked. A line has been drawn. A new understanding has taken root, and it begins to spread. You are no longer fully present. You are now divided, part of you in the moment, part of you already leaving, part of you still hoping it's a mistake, part of you preparing for the fallout. All of you irreversibly changed. Truth doesn't just remove illusions, it exposes intentions. It shows you who was protecting you, and who was protecting the lie. It shows you the difference between those who wanted your happiness and those who wanted your obedience. It shows you how many people knew and said nothing, and how long they were willing to let you live in the dark. The moment doesn't explode, it unfolds. Slowly, deeply, like a wound that was always there but finally felt. You begin to detach. Not out of choice, but necessity. The people around you continue their roles, unaware that for you, everything is now tinted. You no longer hear them the same. You no longer look at them the same. You no longer believe in them the same, and still, the truth remains solid, quiet, undeniable. It doesn't ask for validation. It doesn't require consensus. It simply exists. And now, you exist with it, carrying it, processing it, realizing its implications, knowing what it means for the relationships you once held dear, for the stories you once told yourself, for the safety you once felt in spaces that were never fully safe. It doesn't matter if the truth was small in detail. Its impact is massive in meaning. It redefines loyalty. It repositions people. It reveals values. It exposes choices made in shadows. It names betrayals that were disguised as kindness. And it leaves you with one undeniable fact. You were never told the full story. And now, you are asterisk. Truth doesn't simply reveal. It rewrites. It doesn't enter your life, gently it fractures the foundation, rearranging every familiar shape and forcing you to reevaluate what was once believed to be solid. What's most unsettling isn't always the content of the truth, but the implication that everything surrounding it was false. It reorders memory, reframes interactions, and forces a painful kind of clarity. What you thought was love now resembles manipulation. What once felt like loyalty starts to look like silence. What you called connection begins to feel like control. Everything becomes a question mark. The people you trusted, the moments you cherished, the bonds you believed were sacred, all suddenly under the lens of suspicion. And not because you want to doubt them, but because the illusion you lived in no longer holds its shape. You begin to see the cracks that were always there, the inconsistencies you once excused, the feelings you pushed away to keep the peace. You weren't blind, you were surviving. And survival often requires selective sight. With every realization, a new wound opens, not from what was done, but from how long it was hidden. The betrayal is not just the act, it's the performance. The pretense. The skill with which others maintained a facade, smiled through lies, laughed beside you while holding secrets in their teeth. You revisit every conversation, searching for signs, and finding them in places you never thought to look. What once seemed like coincidence now feels like coordination. What you brushed off as nothing now screams with significance. The greatest betrayal isn't always in the secret itself, it's in the intimacy that was offered alongside it. It's in the memories that now feel poisoned, the trust that feels stolen, the love that begins to resemble a transaction. The more you unravel, the deeper the loss becomes, not of a specific truth, but of the version of your life that depended on it being hidden. There's grief in this kind of awakening. Not just sadness, but disorientation. A mourning for the person you were before you knew. The one who believed in people who didn't deserve that belief. The one who showed up, who cared, who gave without questioning. That person didn't disappear, they evolved. They had to. Because there is no going back once truth has sharpened your awareness. You can't unsee what has been revealed. You can only choose how to live with it. As the dust settles, perspective becomes your only compass. You no longer navigate by memory, but by reality. The reality that some people lied while looking you in the eye. That some people stayed silent when they should have spoken. That the ones who said they loved you had their own definition of love, one that didn't include honesty, accountability, or respect. That doesn't mean you didn't love them. It means you now understand they loved you differently than you needed. You start to rebuild the timeline, not based on what you felt, but on what you know. The hidden interactions. The unspoken glances. The choices made without your knowledge. It becomes a quiet excavation of every moment that now feels different. The messages left unanswered. The events you weren't invited to. The gifts you gave that were never acknowledged. The questions that were always met with vague answers. The support that always felt conditional. Every detail becomes a clue in the larger realization that your trust was never protected. What hurts the most is the fact that you didn't ask for any of this. You weren't looking to expose anyone. You weren't trying to dig up secrets. You simply showed up with love, with presence, with belief. And in return, you were handed a version of reality that wasn't real. You were included in the celebration, but excluded from the truth. You were embraced publicly, while privately being deceived. And now, even the hugs feel suspicious. The warmth feels cold in hindsight. Still, there's no rage, just exhaustion. Exhaustion from carrying the weight of someone else's lie. From having to pretend, perform, participate in a narrative that never included your full dignity. And now that the mask has fallen, you're not interested in wearing your own. You're done pretending. Done shrinking to protect someone else's comfort. Done excusing things that would never have been excused had they happened to someone else. You begin to pull away, not from bitterness, but from clarity. You no longer attend every gathering, respond to every message, accept every invitation. You start measuring your interactions differently. Who makes you feel safe? Who makes you feel small? Who listens when you speak, and who listens only to respond? Who protects your absence when you're not in the room? These are the new metrics. And most of the people who once passed them no longer qualify. There's a quiet power in no longer needing the illusion. You don't seek revenge, or confrontation, or confession. You seek space, silence, distance from the chaos, disguised as closeness. You no longer chase understanding from people who chose confusion. You no longer try to fix what they chose to fracture. You simply step back and in doing so, step forward into something far more authentic. As the truth continues to settle in your bones, you find moments of peace. Not because the hurt has vanished, but because you've stopped resisting it. You've stopped begging the story to change. You've stopped trying to return to a version of life that never really existed. You are no longer fighting for clarity. You are becoming it, and in that becoming, you find something that was missing long before the lie was ever revealed: yourself. You now see how often you were the one doing the emotional labor, the one maintaining the connection, the one offering grace in situations that deserved boundaries. You realize that love without honesty is not love, it's performance. That friendship without integrity is not friendship, it's convenience. That family without respect is not safety, it's obligation. And you are no longer interested in relationships that require you to abandon yourself. The rewrite doesn't end with erasure, ends with release. You let go of what they said. You let go of what they didn't say. You let go of the version of you who didn't know, and you honor her for surviving. For holding on, for keeping faith, even when it wasn't deserved. She was not naive, she was hopeful. She was not foolish, she was loyal. And her heart is not a weakness. It is the reason you made it through now. The pen is in your hand. The truth is in your possession. And the story going forward is yours to write, not for validation, not for vengeance, but for freedom. Freedom from the roles they wrote for you. Freedom from the narratives that kept you small. Freedom from the silence that made you question your worth. What was whispered changed everything, but what you do with the truth will define what comes next. Not because you owe anyone a response, but because you owe yourself a life built on clarity, not illusion. And now, you finally have the chance to live it. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Fallout isn't always loud. It doesn't always look like slammed doors, raised voices, or explosive endings. Sometimes, it looks like quiet withdrawals. Like eye contact that doesn't linger anymore. Like delayed responses to messages that once mattered. Like a presence that starts to disappear in subtle pieces until it's no longer felt at all. Fallout isn't about destruction, it's about revelation. It's about everything that was already broken, finally being visible. There's a particular silence that follows a truth bomb, one that feels more loaded than any words. It's the silence of realization. The silence where people stop pretending. The silence when the mask slips, and nobody rushes to fix it. The silence where everyone knows, but no one acknowledges. That's the space where relationships begin to reshape themselves. Not by choice, but by necessity. What was said cannot be unsaid. What was seen cannot be unseen. The truth has a ripple effect. It doesn't just impact the person it was revealed to, it spreads, impacting everyone connected to it. People who once felt like home begin to feel like strangers. Words that once comforted now sound rehearsed. Gestures that once felt kind now feel calculated. It's not always that the people changed, it's that your understanding of them did. They were always this way, but now you see them without the filter of trust, and when the lens changes, so does the emotional gravity. The people you once leaned on suddenly feel unsafe. The memories you once treasured feel contaminated. The spaces you once felt welcome in now feel like traps. There's no drama, no scene. Just a quiet closing of doors inside your chest. The kind of detachment that doesn't need announcement, only confirmation. Trust, once broken, doesn't scream, it stops showing up. It stops giving benefit of the doubt. It stops assuming good intent. It stops opening itself wide for people who have already shown what they will do with that openness. And in the aftermath of truth, trust becomes scarce. Not because you're bitter, but because you're finally protecting what should have been protected long ago. Your peace. People begin to notice. The ones who knew, the ones who were complicit, the ones who benefited from the lie, they feel the shift. They may not say it, but they sense the distance. They sense the way you don't engage the same way. The way your eyes don't soften like they used to. The way your laughter doesn't flow as freely in their presence. The way your spirit is no longer open for harm. Disguised as family or friendship. They may accuse you of being cold, distant, changed, and they wouldn't be wrong. But the change wasn't random, it was earned. It was built over time. Through the erosion of trust. Through the weight of betrayal. Through the knowledge that you were left in the dark by people who claimed to love you. This version of you isn't colder, it's wiser. This distance isn't cruelty, it's clarity. The fallout isn't something you plan. It's something that happens because truth rearranges the landscape. It shifts who you call in a crisis. Who you confide in when life feels heavy. Who you believe when they say, "I've got your back." It strips away performance and leaves only what's real. And sometimes, what's real is disappointment. Sometimes, what's left standing is far less than what you thought was there. But in that disappointment is also liberation. Because when the performance ends, the rebuilding can begin. You're no longer stuck performing for love, proving your worth, or earning inclusion. You stop showing up for people who celebrate you publicly while betraying you privately. You stop negotiating your standards in order to maintain appearances. You stop carrying the emotional weight for people who would never lift it for you. The emotional landscape begins to shift. What you used to fear, losing connection, being misunderstood, standing alone, no longer terrifies you. Because you've seen what staying connected to the wrong people costs. You've tasted the bitterness of betrayal. You've learned that closeness is meaningless if it's not rooted in truth. And now, solitude feels more sacred than company that requires self-abandonment. You start to choose differently. You're slower to share, quicker to observe. You trust patterns more than promises. You recognize that not every connection is meant to be held onto. Some are meant to teach you. Some are meant to wake you up. Some are meant to show you what you will never tolerate again. And all of them are valuable, even the painful ones, because they brought you here. To this clarity, to this self-awareness, to this refusal to settle. The people who truly love you notice the shift, too, but they don't demand explanations. They don't accuse you of being distant. They don't try to pull you back into old patterns. Instead, they meet you where you are with patience, with presence, with honesty. They listen more than they speak. They offer space instead of pressure. And most importantly, they don't weaponize your boundaries. They respect them. But those people are rare. Most will not understand your transformation. They will resist it. They will question it. They will take your healing personally. They will try to guilt you back into the version of yourself that tolerated their behavior. But you don't go back. Not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself enough to choose peace over proximity. The fallout becomes a sorting process. People reveal themselves, not through grand betrayals, but through subtle actions or inactions. Who stands with you when you speak your truth? Who gets uncomfortable and disappears? Who tries to spin the narrative to make themselves the victim? Who takes accountability, and who avoids it? The answers arrive quietly, but they arrive consistently. And as they do, your circle gets smaller. Your energy becomes more sacred. Your standards become non-negotiable. You stop seeking closure from people who don't even give you honesty. You stop arguing with those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop trying to be the bigger person when that's code for tolerating harm. Instead, you become the healthier person, the clearer person, the person who chooses themselves without apology. You don't need to expose anyone. You don't need to explain yourself. Your peace is proof enough. Your silence is not weakness, it's restraint. Your absence is not drama, it's healing. And your boundaries are not punishment, they're protection. Not just from others, but from the version of you that didn't yet know what you deserved, and maybe the biggest surprise in the fallout is the peace that follows. After the discomfort, after the grief, after the letting go, there's a quiet you didn't expect, a calm that comes from no longer holding on to people who weren't holding on to you. A freedom that rises from finally releasing relationships built on control, a strength that grows from refusing to perform your worth ever again. You learn that peace isn't found in fixing broken connections, it's found in honoring your truth, even when it costs you comfort. And in doing so, you become someone new, someone who doesn't chase validation, someone who doesn't explain their standards, someone who doesn't water themselves down to be digestible, someone who walks away with dignity intact. Even if their heart is heavy, the fallout no one saw coming becomes the transformation no one can stop. And in that transformation, you find yourself not as they defined you, but as you were always meant to be, whole, aware, and finally free. There comes a moment, after the unraveling, after the silence, after the truth has detonated everything familiar, when you finally start breathing again. It doesn't happen all at once. It arrives in fragments, in small moments of realization, that you no longer need to hold on to what broke you. The pieces of your old life are still scattered, but now, instead of trying to put them back where they were, you begin to build something new, not a restoration, a reinvention. The shattered truth didn't destroy you, it released you. It tore away everything that was fake, conditional, performative, or fragile. It exposed the people who were only loyal to their version of youth, a version that stayed quiet, gave endlessly, didn't ask questions, and didn't demand honesty. And now that those roles are no longer yours to play, the space left behind is sacred. It belongs only to who you are without disguise, without apology, without dilution. This version of you is different, not broken, not bitter, just done. Done with justifying your boundaries. Done with excusing silence as misunderstanding. Done with tolerating proximity without sincerity. You've spent too long holding spaces for people who would abandon you at the first sign of discomfort. Too long adjusting your truth so others wouldn't feel the weight of their own. Too long believing that your love could cover their deception. But now, you understand that clarity is a gift. That pain, when processed, instead of avoided, becomes wisdom. That truth, even when it ruins the story you believed in, gives you the tools to write a better one. You no longer wish to go back. You no longer crave the old connections. You mourn them, yes, but you don't need them, because they were never built for the real, only for the version you had to become to survive them. Strength doesn't come from the absence of pain. It comes from facing it, from letting it teach you, from standing in the wreckage of what was and choosing to rise, not because you're unbothered, but because you're ready. Ready to live in alignment with yourself. Ready to protect your peace at all costs. Ready to walk away from anything that asks you to betray your intuition ever again. There is no going back to before. There is only forward. And forward requires you to see everything clearly. You see now who was showing up only when it benefited them. You see who supported you until your truth made them uncomfortable. You see who claimed loyalty while choosing comfort over courage. And most of all, you see that none of their choices were about you. Their deception, their silence, their avoidance, it was never proof of your lack. It was evidence of their fear. You learn that healing is not about getting over what happened, it's about integrating it, owning it, learning to trust yourself again. You were not foolish, you were trusting. You were not weak, you were committed. And that is not something to be ashamed of. That is something to honor. Because even in betrayal, you showed up with love. You gave what you wished to receive. And now, you give that same love to yourself. The strength you now carry is subtle, but unshakable. It's in the way you no longer flinch when people leave. It's in the way you no longer need to be chosen by people who only show up when it's easy. It's in the way you say no without guilt, and yes without fear. Your strength is not in hardness, it's in clarity. In softness that is protected. In presence that is intentional. In relationships that feel safe, not performative. There are still days when grief shows up uninvited. When memories tug at the edges of your peace. When you wonder if things could have been different. That's okay. Healing isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. But every time the pain resurfaces, you meet it with more understanding. You hold it with more compassion. You no longer drown in it. You walk through it, because now you know the difference between connection and captivity, between belonging and performing, between love and obligation. You stop confusing familiarity with safety. You stop assigning roles to people who never earned them. You let go of narratives that served others but diminished you. You break generational patterns of silence. You choose truth over tradition, even when it costs you comfort. And in that choice, you find yourself in the quiet mornings where no one is demanding your energy. In the nights when your thoughts no longer spiral with regret. In the friendships that meet you with mutual effort. In the solitude that no longer feels lonely. In the voice inside you that finally feels trusted. You realize that peace is not found in what you lost, it's found in what you know. Longer tolerate that the strength you've earned is not something others can take from you. It doesn't depend on anyone else's approval. It's yours. Built through heartbreak. Tempered through isolation. Refined through truth. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to shout. It speaks through boundaries. Through stillness. Through the power to walk away without fanfare. You are no longer waiting for apologies that may never come. No longer hoping for closure from people who can't face themselves. No longer offering grace to those who mistake it for access. Your compassion remains intact, but your tolerance has changed. You can forgive without forgetting. You can release without returning. You can love people from afar without letting them back into your soul. There's freedom in no longer needing to be understood by those who chose not to understand you. In no longer shrinking to fit into spaces you've outgrown. In no longer confusing silence for strength. You don't have to prove anything anymore. Not your loyalty. Not your intentions. Not your pain. The people who truly see you don't need proof. They listen. They believe. They show up. And if no one shows up, you do. That's the deepest strength of all. Becoming the home you never had. Being the love you were always searching for. Protecting the version of you that was once too afraid to speak. You are not bitter. You are blooming. You are not hard. You are whole. You are not alone. You are aligned. The story didn't end with the truth. It began with it, because now, your life is not about proving your worth. It's about protecting your energy. It's about living honestly, loving consciously, and walking away from anything that asks you to abandon your clarity. The truth hurt, but it also healed. It burned down what was never real, and in the ashes, you found what was always waiting, the chance to begin again. This time, not as the person they wanted you to be, but as the person you were always becoming.